To Winterfell we pledge the faith of Greywater. Hearth and heart and harvest we yield up to you, my lord. Our swords and spears and arrows are yours to command. Grant mercy to our weak, help to our helpless, and justice to all, and we shall never fail you. I swear it by earth and water. I swear it by bronze and iron. We swear it by ice and fire. This is the oath that Jojen and Meera Reed say to Bran Stark at the Harvest Festival when they first meet him. It stands out for a few reasons, notably that Bran in the next paragraph thinks that he's never heard the oath before and he doesn't know what to say, so he just gives the best generic, lordly response that he can think of. Now, given that the Reeds are a potential source of secret knowledge or secret magical knowledge, there's been a lot of people who have wondered over the years what exactly this oath could mean. Basically, when the children of the man who was at the Tower of Joy, who has been to the Isle of Faces, and who is said to be able to turn earth into water and water into earth with just a whispered word, has his children show up and start dropping some strange oath that you've never heard before, it probably does make sense to look for some deeper meaning in these specific words that they're saying. And especially so when they literally say ice and fire, which is, the whole name of the series. Now, I've seen this oath speculated about over the years, and the general consensus is that it is probably some sort of secret magical knowledge or some sort of old lost oath that has been forgotten by the other houses, but it's still remembered by the Reeds because they have lots of secret magical knowledge. Or, if you don't think it's that, you could say it's just some Crannogman cultural thing that they have a different oath that is older or at least just different than the oaths that the other houses have, and it's just something that Bran hasn't been taught before. And one more bit of speculation I've seen on Reddit in the past is the idea that it is some sort of secret oath alluding to some knowledge shared between Ned and Howland, the idea of Jon being a mix of ice and fire, and potentially something to do with whatever they were told was going on at the Tower of Joy. The idea of the Targaryens knowing about a Song of Ice and Fire as a prophecy, and the idea that Rhaegar was trying to birth Jon specifically with Lyanna for prophetic reasons, could definitely lend some strength to this theory. That is, of course, assuming that bit of world building comes from George himself, but to be honest, it seems like the Targaryen dynasty being motivated the entire time by a prophecy of ice and fire, that feels like a pretty big thing for House of the Dragon to add if George wasn't okay with it, so that feels to me like a bit of world building and lore that he would have approved of. So what's the reason that I don't personally think that the ice and fire in this oath has anything to do with Jon or his parentage? Well, it comes down to this. Imagine that you have a very good friend who you have entrusted with a very important secret that if anyone finds out could literally lead to one of your family members dying or war breaking out in your country. This is a big deal and an important secret that you have literally kept from your wife at great personal cost for your entire life. And then, this guy sends his kids north to the Harvest Festival and has taught them an oath that's going to be said in front of everyone. How annoyed would you be if you were this guy, and your good friend has his kids make like a winking nod to be like, hey, we know the secret, wink wink, how cool is that? In front of everyone at the Harvest Festival is not the time that they are going to do a sly little inside joke for Bran about a big secret that is literally potentially deadly. So while I do think this is a natural place for your brain to go as a first potential explanation for what they're talking about, given that Howland was at the Tower of Joy, I think there's actually a deeper magical meaning that could be going on here. In fact, the first time that I looked back at the wording of this oath, after starting this series, it all kind of just really fell into place and became really clear to me, and maybe it's all doing the same to you if you've watched this entire series so far. We talked about how there's a lot of Norse mythology inspirations in the world building and the magic system of A Song of Ice and Fire, and how it all seems to be building towards a cycle of rebirth in Ice and Fire, the same way that Norse mythology ends with Ragnarok as a meeting of ice and fire, which leads to a cycle of rebirth. And in one previous video, I proposed that when ice and fire come together, they make water, which is generally seen to be the ingredient that drives growth and the creation of life, and therefore ice and fire making water, which is able to create new life, is a perfect metaphor for this cycle of rebirth. It was then pointed out in the comments by someone who probably knows more about Norse mythology than I do, that it's actually water and earth that are the ingredients of creation in Norse mythology. And so therefore the actual byproduct of the end times would likely be water and earth. This is a bit of very helpful context to have when we're talking about Howland Reed and his visit to the Isle of Faces and his potential knowledge of old green magic, which is another thing that we've talked about a lot in this series. The idea that magic in Westeros, like Garth the Green back in the Age of Heroes, it used to be green magic. Nowadays it's blood magic and shadow magic, and the weirwoods themselves are even drinking blood, which might not be the natural state of a weirwood tree. I have speculated that it seems most likely a weirwood tree would naturally drink water, like most trees would drink, and if water and earth are the ingredients for green magic, well, that kinda just makes a whole lot of sense. These are the things that trees and plants in general take in to grow. These are the things that life seems to be built out of on the basic level, right? Water and different minerals and building blocks taken from earth, all to create life. That's a bit of interesting context to consider when one of the powers ascribed to Howland Reed is the ability to change water into earth and earth into water with nothing but a whispered word. This sounds like someone who has learned to practice green magic, which would make sense if he was allowed to visit the Isle of Faces in order to learn this specific green magic. So again, if water and earth are the ingredients of green magic, and that is the beginning state of magic in this whole big cycle, and it slowly grows and corrupts as people advance and things change, and then eventually it ends in ice and fire and begins the cycle again, well, then this entire oath kind of really just falls into place, doesn't it? The entire beginning is just essentially establishing the feudal contract, and interestingly, it includes both sides, right? It says, we will do this for you, we will give you these yields from our crops, we will give you our swords and our spears, but you will do this for us. And this was the entire feudal contract that you have to remember, because it's easy to look back on feudalism and be like, wow, that would suck, what a terrible system. But the thing that you have to remember is originally when people adopted the system of feudalism, they were adopting it so that they would get the benefits that these lords would give them. And all of that is spelled out in the oath that the Reeds say to the Starks. The Starks are in charge of bringing justice and peace and protection, essentially, to all of the lands who swear to them. It was because feudalism managed to give people benefits, at the beginning at least, more often than not, that it became such a widespread custom, right? Generally, people adopt things that are beneficial to them more often than not, and then those things slowly have to become corrupted over time. You don't generally get large masses of people to agree to like some terrible system of control that abuses them right from the get-go. Now, I'm obviously not here trying to make a defense of feudalism or saying that we should go back to anything resembling feudalism. I'm just saying, like, it's easy to see how when you're a poor farmer who doesn't have any spears, all of a sudden some guy shows up and says, hey, we'll give you a bunch of soldiers, protect all your crops. If you give us 20% of those crops, you're going to be like, oh, heck yeah, the bandits come and take 100% of the crops every time, so this is way better, right? You have to take these things into context, and this oath is really just showing the context of why these contracts were established in the beginning. So the beginning part is just the feudal contract, which I think was pretty obvious from the beginning. The mystery is all in what they are swearing by. They swear by earth and water, they swear by bronze and iron, and then they swear by ice and fire. And given the context of what we've just talked about, that makes complete sense to me. They are swearing throughout all of time. They're swearing through the entire cycle, and this is just essentially a way of saying forever, or for the entire age, all while just saying also that we are aware of the grand magical cycle that's at play in the world, right? It is essentially what many people thought. It's essentially the Reeds having secret magical knowledge, and therefore wording the things that they talk about differently. So they're swearing for all time to serve the Starks, but they are using the language of this cycle of rebirth, of earth and water, then the advancement of mankind using bronze and iron as essentially the middle of the stage where humans are out there and advancing, and then the end times of ice and fire. We swear forever. So that's definitely how I interpret this oath by the Reeds, and I'm curious to know what you all think down in the comments. Does that hold up? Is that a good explanation for what they're saying? Or is this all just me having confirmation bias because I happen to read this oath for the first time in a long time, right in the middle of covering a giant series about how I think all of this is going through a cycle of rebirth, where it started with earth and water, and will end in ice and fire, and how well bronze and iron just fit as a perfect middle stage for all of that. Am I seeing things, or is this there, and is this being there a better confirmation of some of the things that we've been talking about? Let me know what you all think down in the comments. Now, as a bit of a treat for you, luckily, the first time I actually read this oath in probably a few years, it happened to be live on a live stream with Taco from Something to Talk About. So, if you wanted to go check that out, it's going to be one of the end cards of this video, and Taco, if you haven't seen his channel, he does a lot of covering of minor characters and things like that, and occasionally he will do cool live streams, like this one we were coming up with house words for houses that don't have any, and we eventually got around to the reeds, and that's what led me to figuring out, let's take a look at that oath that they said and see if we can find some cool house words in the oath. So if you would like to sort of watch the moment that this theory was live crafted, the timestamp in that video is going to be at about 3 hours, 17 minutes and a half. Roughly 3 hours, 17 minutes, 30 seconds, we start talking about the oath that the reeds say to Bran when we were looking for potential house words. And yes, that means you will see us. It was after midnight, and we were 3 hours into a live stream, partially brain fried, had been going for a while. But I did eventually sort of piece together this theory just from reading the oath, so if you want to see how that sort of thing happens live, you can go check that out, and I would definitely recommend you check out Taco's channel. As I said, he's done a lot of work on minor characters, and over the past year, he's basically been pretty reliably pumping out videos covering different minor characters in A Song of Ice and Fire who are often overlooked. And if he gets a few more subscribers, next year he could actually start getting paid for all of the ads that you would have to watch if you were going to look at all of those videos he's done about all these minor characters. And that would be pretty neat. So check that out if it seems like it's your thing. And Happy New Year to all of you who are watching this around when the video comes out. Lots of exciting things coming up on the channel for the new year, so stay tuned for that, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you with something else very soon.